everyone, this is a tutorial for my mushroom crochet coin purses. This project is super easy and cute, and so I'm really excited to share it with you. Be sure to follow me on all my socials if you don't already for more info on upcoming projects. This is an overview of the stitches and techniques we'll be using. We're going to be using single crochet, slip stitch. We'll be working in the round and using increases and decreases. Here's an overview of the materials you'll need for this project. You can use any type of medium 4-weight yarn. I'll be using acrylic and cotton. For your crochet hook, I recommend sizing down about 1.5 millimeters. The yarn I'm using suggests 5.5, but I'm using a 4 millimeter hook. You'll also need a tapestry and a sewing needle, scissors, a metal coin purse handle, thread, and optional is some white felt if you want to create some spots to put on your mushroom. Here are all the materials I'll be using. Each skein of yarn is about 70 grams, and I would say I didn't even use about 1/4 of each one, so this project doesn't take a lot of yarn. Here is the yarn info of the purple cotton yarn for your reference. The metal coin purse handle can be purchased at most craft stores and online. I'll put a link in the description to a couple of my favorites. Now we're ready to start part 1, which is making the mushroom cap. Begin by putting a slip knot on your hook and then chaining 3. Alternatively, you can also create a magic circle. Place a stitch marker on your chain so that we can find the middle of our circle later. We're now going to slip stitch into the very first chain we made. Chain 1, and now we're going to put 6 single crochets into the middle of our circle, which should be indicated by our stitch marker. So that's 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, 3, 4, 5, and the final 6th single crochet. To start our next round, we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch that we made, so you can go ahead and count back 6 to find the first one. Then slip stitch. We're now going to put 2 single crochets into every single stitch. At the end of the row, you should have a total of 12 stitches. Put your first 2 single crochets into the first stitch from your hook. You can place a stitch marker into your very first stitch in order to keep track of your rows. Continue putting 2 single crochets into every stitch until you reach the end of the row. Once you finish that round, end your row by slip stitching into the very first stitch you made and chain 1. Be sure to end all your rows this way. To begin this next round, we're going to do 1 single crochet and then an increase, which is 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So in the first stitch from your hook, put 1 single crochet. In the next stitch, put 2 single crochets in the same stitch. In the next stitch, put 1 single crochet. In the next one, do an increase, which is 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Continue doing this pattern until you reach the end of the row. For this third row, we're going to be doing 2 single crochets and an increase. So in the very first stitch, put 1 single crochet. In the next one, put 1 single crochet. And then in the third stitch, do an increase, which is 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Once again, we're going to continue doing this pattern until we reach the end of the row. As you can see, our circle continues to get bigger, and so for this next row, we're going to be doing 3 single crochets and then an increase. So in the first stitch from your hook, put 1 single crochet. In the next, put another single crochet. In the third stitch, put another single crochet. And then in the fourth stitch, place an increase. And so once again, we're going to continue doing this pattern all the way until we reach the end of the row. And so by now, you've probably noticed that there is a pattern to how we're increasing this circle. Instead of showing you every single row, I'm going to put the instructions on the screen so it doesn't get too repetitive. Here are the instructions for the next 4 rounds. In total, I do 8 rounds. However, you may need to do less or more rounds depending on the size of your handle. The ultimate goal is to create a circle that is large enough to fill the inside of your handle. So this is what going up to 7 single crochets looks like, and as you can see, it fits perfectly inside my handle. If you have a smaller one or a larger one, you may need to do more or less. But once you get the desired size of your circle, we're going to go ahead and just do rows and rows of single crochets. Once again, the amount of single crochets that you do depends on the size of your handle. For me, I did 19 rows of single crochets, and this is what it looks like. For your reference, this ends up measuring to be about 3.5 inches tall. If you're not sure when to stop doing rows of single crochet or if it's tall enough, you can check by placing it inside the handle. You can just try and wiggle it inside and then fold it over as if you're closing it, and then you can check and see if that looks like enough room. Now that we've finished the mushroom cap, it's time to do part 2, which is creating the stem. We're going to use the same techniques that we used to make the mushroom cap, so go ahead and create a slip knot, place that on your hook, and then chain 3. Alternatively, you can create a magic circle. Place a stitch marker on your chain so that we can find the middle of our circle later. You're then going to slip stitch into the very first chain that you made. Chain 1, and then put 6 single crochets into the middle of the circle. Once you finish putting 6 single crochets into the center of the circle, slip stitch to end the row. We're now going to put 2 single crochets into every single stitch, and so when you end the row you should have a total of 12 stitches. The instructions for the next 2 rows are on the screen. Once you've finished them, your circle should look like this. For your reference, it measures to be about 2 inches. And of course, if you want your stem to be bigger or smaller, you can do more or less rounds. Once you get the desired size for your circle, we're just going to do rows and rows of single crochets in order to build up this circle. The amount of rows that you do is totally up to you and your preference for how long you want your stem to be. I chose to do 11 rows of single crochets, and once you're finished with your stem, be sure to cut a really long tail because we're going to use that later to sew the stem into the mushroom cap. If you're using acrylic or cotton yarn for your stem, it should already be pretty stiff, but I wanted to give it some more structure, so I'm going to be filling it with some stuffing. You can also use scrap yarn or scrap fabric to fill your stem. Now that we have our stem and mushroom cap completed, we can now move on to part 3, which is sewing it all together. To attach the mushroom cap, place it inside the metal handle. It might take a little bit of wiggling, but it should fit. This next part is a little bit tricky, but we want to essentially place the edge of the mushroom cap into that lip of the metal handle, and you might need a tool such as a tapestry needle or even a crochet hook to just kind of like wiggle it inside there and just like push it into the opening. Once the mushroom cap is all tucked into the handle, we're going to take our threaded sewing needle and insert it into the very first hole, making sure to catch the fabric. You're going to want to thread it towards you so that the knot at the end of the needle is on the inside of the purse and doesn't show on the outside. Insert the needle into the next hole and thread it through. Continue to sew the mushroom cap to the handle until you reach the end of that side. Be sure to always check that the fabric is firmly tucked into the handle because it can slip while you're sewing. Once you've finished, it should look like this. As you can see, the thread is woven throughout the handle. If you've reached the end and you have extra thread, you can actually double back and sew it again. This will help make the purse a little stronger, but it's totally optional. If you don't have enough thread to continue, you can just end it by tying the thread off. After you repeat this process on the other side with a new piece of thread, it should be firmly attached and it'll look something like this. The next and final step is to attach the stem to the mushroom cap. Take the extra yarn and thread it through a tapestry needle. Place the stem onto the mushroom cap, and then when you're happy with the placement, take the threaded yarn and insert it into the bottom of the mushroom cap. Open up the purse and pull the needle through. You're then going to continue to sew the stem in place by inserting the needle back into the stem, catching the edge, pulling it through, and then inserting it back into the mushroom cap. Repeat this process until the stem is sewn firmly to the mushroom cap. Once you've completely attached the stem and the mushroom cap and fastened off your yarn, you are done with the project. From here, you can add some additional elements such as spots or embroidery to make it more personalized. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, I hope you'll like and subscribe as well as connect with me on my other socials, which are linked in the description.